Good evening, everyone. I would like to call this special board meeting of 22nd April 2025 to order, acknowledging that we are meeting this evening on the unceded and unsurrendered homelands of the Algonquin Nation. And I would like to acknowledge and thank the Algonquin people for their stewardship of these lands since time immemorial. We have to approve our agenda, and I would note that there has been a request from Tugbat Taz, who is listed at 5.1K on your agenda, to be moved up if at all possible. And if that can be reflected in the agenda when it's moved, I would appreciate it. So do we have a mover? Trustee Milburn, thank you. Seconded by Trustee Lyra. Are there any other changes to the agenda? And seeing none, I'll call the question on the agenda. All those in favor and opposed, the motion is granted. Is approved. Moving on then, in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, does any board member have an interest to declare? And seeing none, that brings us on to item 5 on our agenda, our delegations. And before we begin, I'd like to welcome the delegates, all of you, to our meeting space, knowing that all of you have important comments to make regarding the program model that our staff have put forward for potential changes to our elementary programming across the district. Each delegation will have 3 minutes to speak. And I ask if you could please stay within your allocated time and speak directly into the microphone. You have all been provided with our expectations for respectful and constructive presentations consistent with the principles of the OCDSB Code of Conduct and Human Rights Policy and with the Ontario Human Rights Code. Please refrain from using offensive or defamatory language and from making negative or derogatory personal references about trustees, staff, or others. Also, you may not misuse personal information relating to OCDSB students, staff, or trustees, or engage in debate with other delegates, staff, or board members. Delegations engaging in any behavior that is disruptive to the meeting or that violates the behavioral expectations of which you've been informed may have their delegations stopped by me as chair and may even be removed from the meeting. Please stick to the presentation you've prepared and refrain from commenting on the content of other delegations that may precede you. At the end of your delegation, up to three questions from trustees, questions of clarification may be asked. If there's something that you've said that trustees haven't heard properly or that was unclear as to your meaning, you will have 1 minute to respond to each question. And if no one asks a question, please take that as a compliment because it simply means that your delegation was clear, well presented, heard, and understood. We will be listening closely to all of your presentations, and we value the time and effort that you've made to put them together and to come here this evening to share your views on the elementary program review. And finally, I will ask that those people who are present would refrain from applauding, cheering, or booing during our meeting. This is not a concert or a sports event, but it is an opportunity for every delegation to be heard with our full attention and no distractions. I will tonight, however, make a very small exception to that, knowing that there is significant interest in the hockey game that is happening in Toronto this evening. So when we have a break, if I have a score that I can share, I will do that. But we didn't change the meeting time because of the hockey game. And with that, I would like to move on and invite Tugbat Taz to come forward for her presentation regarding the language learning disabilities class. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, board members, director, and trustee. My name is Tugbat Taz. I have a daughter, Rana Taz, who has a speech impairment secondary to her epilepsy. From a very young age, we did everything we could, from working with private speech therapists to engaging with first words to support her communication development before she even started school. When Rana began junior kindergarten, she was a quiet, reserved little girl. She would wear her thick coat all day because it helped her feel hidden in a busy, overwhelming classroom. Despite making some progress in her mainstream kindergarten class, her seizures continued to disrupt her language, leaving her able to follow only short, direct instructions. Longer directions would confuse her. Her speech was difficult to understand, even for adults, let alone her peers. That created a barrier, not just to learning, but to play, socializing, and self-advocacy. After meeting the eligibility criteria, Rana was given the opportunity to attend language learning disability program at Castle Frank Public School, all the way from grade 1 to grade 3. That opportunity changed everything for her. In the LLD program, Rana received the intense support she needed, not just academically, but emotionally and socially. She had access to a speech language therapist 2 to 3 times a week. Her learning was tailored to her needs in a small, structured classroom of just 10 students. Most importantly, she was surrounded by peers who, like her, were also working twice as hard to succeed. In this environment, she didn't feel different. In her words, she loved going to school and learning something new every day. She felt like she belonged. By grade 3, Rana had outgrown her shell. She became bubbly and communicative. Not only did she gain academic skills, but also a sense of confidence. Taking her older sister as a role model, her biggest goal since grade 1 was to be able to read, and by the end of the program, she was able to read her favorite comic books independently. Most importantly, she learned to advocate for herself, to ask for help when she needed it, and to participate in class. She was ready to transition to grade 4, not because she was pushed too soon, but because she was truly prepared. I truly believe that if Rana had been placed in a regular classroom from the start, it would have crushed her confidence. The gap between her and her peers would have widened early and might never have closed. Instead, this program gave her the chance to thrive. Our kids need this program. It offers the kind of intensive, specialized support that can't be replicated in a mainstream classroom setting, no matter how inclusive or well-intentioned. In the LLD setting, students are surrounded by peers with similar challenges, which builds a sense of belonging and self-esteem. I recognize I'm limited for time, so hopping on to the highlight. One important point I'd like to urge you to consider: LLD classrooms don't have educational assistants. In this program, if this program is dissolved, there are no EAs to reassign to support these students in their home community schools. So how will they be truly supported? This program isn't an extra. It's essential and foundational for learning for kids like Rana. It gave our daughter and many others not just a chance to learn, but a chance to believe in themselves again. Please keep the LLD programs open. Our kids deserve a chance.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We have a question for you from Trustee Kaplan-Murth.
Thank you. Thank you for telling us about your daughter. I just wanted you to clarify, because you did mention at the end, you said that she had the intense supports of a speech language therapist 2 to 3 times a week, and that children similar to her who children similar to her, if they didn't have those supports, wouldn't be able to get that from an EA occasionally. What would you have done? And I understand in your case, she met eligibility requirements according to CHIO, but like, what would you have done if you hadn't been able to get her into a specialized program? Do you have any sense of, or what would happen to other children who don't have that?
Thank you so much, Trustee Kaplan-Murth. I think our first option would have been to explore the mainstream classrooms if she hadn't been given the opportunity to stay in the LLD class. However, as I've said, there are no support in these classroom settings for speech therapies. Even EAs are not SLP, so they do not provide the therapies that are needed for these kids. So if she were in a mainstream classroom, it would have looked very different for her. She really would not have academically progressed in any way, because the speed at which the kids learn at grade 1 level in terms of reading, writing, and speaking is much different than kids with a diagnosis such as Rana.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for this delegate? And seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Moving on then, our next delegation is from Anchela Nadaraja. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. Hi, my name is Angela, and I have 2 kids. My son is 4 and my daughter is 1. And the EPR splits them up into 2 different schools, JK to 6, Broadview and Churchill. You see, my house is rezoned to Churchill, where my daughter is supposed to start school. But my son has to stay in Broadview because Churchill is phasing out its alternative program, and for his grade offers no dual track option, French immersion. So my kids are split. And I know you're trying to fix this through a new exemptions-based application process founded on clear criteria like keeping siblings together and avoiding 3 transitions in 3 years. But the process is conditional on the capacity and viability of schools in question. What does this mean? Does this mean I am trapped with 2 kids in 2 schools because of Churchill's viability issues? That's really not fair for parents. That's not viable for me or for families in my neighborhood. We would just have to leave the school board. And I want to stay, to be clear, I want to stay. I would stay in either school, just so long as my kids are together. But of course, Churchill's alternative program must thrive for as long as possible and help the families who so desperately rely on it. Which is why in our situation, the only solution is to grant the younger sibling an exemption into Broadview. And this exemption must be a certainty, not a possibility. And so before the May vote, to make this happen, we have 2 recommendations. So first, we recommend a sibling placement provision, where the EPR mandates a student to attend a school outside of their school zone. Siblings must be permitted to attend that school irrespective of viability and capacity issues. See Amanda Wolf's written delegation for more on this. That's 5.2E. Second, a zone of choice. If you need to address viability and capacity issues, extend Churchill's zone, draw from Broadview's capacity on a temporary, voluntary, and walkable basis during this transition period. See written delegation 5.2F by Deirdre Morris-Tawari. We did a survey at Broadview. The number of siblings needing exemptions is small and tapers off over time, a handful after 2027. So please give us certainty, approve these cases unconditionally. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your delegation. Are there any questions? Trustee Nash?
Yes, and good evening, and thank you for your delegation. You mentioned survey. Can you elaborate on the survey?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that question. So We surveyed 625 families at Broadview, 23 who identified as being rezoned to Churchill with younger siblings, so those that'll face this sibling split. Of those 23 families, there are 26 siblings. And just to be very transparent with the numbers, so because grade 1s and above who are rezoned to Churchill must stay at Broadview in 2026. In 2026, there's a double cohort of JKs and SKs. There's about 10 in each cohort that needs to be given an exemption. After that, the numbers taper off to about 5 per year. Yeah, did you have, does that help? Yeah.
Thank you.
And Trustee Jenkins.
Oh, hi there. Thank you for your delegation. Just for clarity, so with the data that you just shared with us, the 10 families and then the 5, that data was, you pulled that from the survey of 625?
Yeah,
And
correct.
sorry, what ages did you say your children were? Sorry.
Oh, my own children are 4 and 1. So my son is in JK, and then my daughter is 1. She'll start school much later. But essentially, this split happens for any kid that is born in 2020 and before, and then 2021 and after.
And Trustee Lyra.
Thanks. Would you be seeking this exemption only while the oldest child is currently going to that school? Or if you were to have other children, would you then want them to also be grandparented through the school that their then older sibling is going to? Because that could potentially leave the district on the hook for a significant amount of time if there are siblings yet to be determined who are being grandfathered year over year.
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. I would say, so just as I mentioned, kids that are born in 2020 and before are getting grandparented, although I know we're trying to get away from this term. And so the likelihood of them having younger siblings is what, they'll have maybe one sibling that's 2 to 3 years younger, maybe another one that's another 5 to 6 youngers. And so those kids would start JK in around 2029, but this is why you see the numbers really tapering off. And then by 2032, Churchill will have finished phasing out its alternative program. And so families could be reunited at Churchill after 2032. So if you wanted to time limit this policy, you could sort of time limit it to 2032.
Thank you.
Thank you for your delegation. And now we can move on to Kathleen Nazer, again regarding special education programming.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you about the Language Learning Disabilities LLD program and my daughter's experience in it. The LLD program supports children with severe language delays, which can be receptive delays impacting the ability to understand spoken or written information, and/or expressive language delays affecting speech. While these delays impact learning, they're not a reflection of the intellectual capacity or the potential of the children. The LLD program has a smaller class size of 10 kids and 1 teacher, plus a speech-language pathologist, or SLP. In my daughter's class, the SLP comes 3 half-days per week to support the children and the teacher. There is no EA support in my daughter's class. The LLD program is an intervention class, aiming to integrate the children into a mainstream classroom once their language skills have caught up. This allows the greatest chance at success in a typical classroom. And the program is successful at doing so. Several children in my daughter's current class will be returning to a mainstream class next year. My daughter Matilda is in grade 2 in the LLD program at Dunlop Public School, and this is her 2nd year in the program. Matilda has a neurologic speech disorder, which has caused her language learning to develop at a rate slower than her peers. She struggles with both receptive and expressive language delays, but is very willing and able to learn in the right setting. She's a bright kid who works very hard in class and loves going to school every day. The support of the SLP as well as the small class size have helped Matilda learn in a supported way, ensuring progress in her language development and her subject knowledge. We have seen remarkable improvements. Matilda has an iPad communication device that helps her with her expressive language when she struggles to speak the words that she wants to say. These devices have a steep learning curve, but Matilda's teacher and the SLP have knowledge of such devices and support her in learning to use the device in the classroom. Social delays often accompany language delays. It's difficult to make friends or join in a game with your peers when you're unable to communicate effectively. The LLD program is a safe place where Matilda is learning those social skills with the support of her teacher and the SLP. While Matilda's language delays are due to a medical condition, many children in the LLD program experience language delays due to factors related to challenging socioeconomic circumstances. As a result, some families may struggle to advocate for the program's importance. I know we are not the loudest voice in the room, but we still hope to be heard. All children in the LLD program are benefiting from a level of language support that does not exist within a mainstream classroom. This program allows children the opportunity to catch up to their peers and then successfully be integrated into a mainstream classroom. Without the LLD program, these children would become lost and overwhelmed in a mainstream class without the ability to speak up for themselves. They would only continue to fall further and further behind. I ask that you please consider protecting the LLD program from being phased out with the elementary program review. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Ms. Nazer? Trustee Kaplan-Murth.
Thank you. Thank you for your delegation. Could you tell us a little bit more? You mentioned that there are a number of families who don't have the supports, who are reliant on this program. Can you give us a sense of what would happen to those children if they didn't have these small class sizes and the other supports that you described?
Yeah, so many children in the program don't have access to be able to see a private speech therapist. These services are quite expensive to do privately. And the support that they get from the SLP in the class is completely different from what could be provided in a mainstream classroom. I'd like to note the difference too between the SLP, so speech language pathologists, there's the speech working on vocal speech, but then there's also the language piece. So the SLP that's in my daughter's LLD class really focuses on the language part of the SLP. So they're working on things like plurals and past tense. And so things that most children in grade 2 in their primary language they don't even have to think about those skills to be able to communicate effectively. And so, yeah, so it's information and services like that these children are getting in this program that they wouldn't have access to elsewhere.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And seeing none, thank you very much, Ms. Nazer. And our next delegate is Sarah Fairchild regarding the Knoxdale-Briar Green boundary. Welcome.
Thank you. Hear me okay? Good evening, trustees and members of the OCDSB. My name is Sarah Fairchild, and I'm a resident of Briar Green and the mother of 2 children currently attending Knoxdale Public School. I'm here to respectfully request a formal grandparenting provision such that Briar Green children who are currently enrolled at Knoxdale in the Early French Immersion program are permitted the option to remain at their school until they complete grade 6. Since the first iteration of the elementary program review plan, Knoxdale families have been united in our conviction that our school community should remain intact. Despite our advocacy, the proposed plan continues to annex Briar Green children, and I emphasize only Briar Green children, from our current school community, moving them instead to Briar Green Public School. Our children are thriving at Knoxdale. They've built strong academic foundations, lasting friendships, and deep bonds with teachers, staff, and classmates. Knoxdale isn't just a school, it's a second home, and to be told that they must leave their school partway through their elementary journey is deeply concerning. The current plan will require our children to leave their established routines and support systems. It will create unnecessary disruption to the continuity many need to stay confident, focused, and engaged in their learning. Many children in this cohort have already been deeply impacted by the disruption of schooling and social isolation imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic. There are several compelling reasons for you to support this request. First, under the revised EPR, Knoxdale is projected to be at 79% of its enrollment capacity. We conducted a recent survey of Briar Green families at Knoxdale. Among 33 respondent families, 23 indicated that they would utilize a grandparent option to keep their children at Knoxdale. The number of students this group represents is just 32. This small number would barely increase Knoxdale enrollment by 3%, leaving it well within the board targets. Further, the number of grandparented students would shrink with every successive school year until 2033-34, when they will all have completed grade 6. Secondly, under the EPR, Middle French immersion students residing in Briar Green and Centrepoint have already been provided an automatic grandparenting provision to Knoxdale, including bus transportation. So why not our children? It would be both equitable and efficient to allow EFI students from Briar Green to access this route, enabling them to continue their education at Knoxdale without incurring additional transportation costs. And finally, while the board has suggested it is developing a grandparenting application process to consider exemptions to the EPR boundaries, this exacerbates uncertainty and stress for families. I would also point out that the consideration of program viability as a criterion to assess grandparenting applications systematically disadvantages students looking to move from smaller schools. A formal grandparenting policy, on the other hand, enables equity and provides stability and clarity during a time of transition. It also alleviates administrative burden both for families and for the board associated with an application process. In closing, this issue is about more than just lines on a map. It's about prioritizing the emotional, academic, and social well-being of real children. Equity demands choice, and if the OCDSB is to uphold equity as a tenet, then I urge you to align to this by granting Briar Green children currently at Knoxdale the option to stay at their school. Thank you.
Thank you for your delegations. Are there any questions? Trustee Jenkins?
And thank you for your delegation. Just clarity again, how many students, was it 32 you said, that wished to be grandfathered to remain at Briar Green?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing any other questions, so thank you very much. Our next presenter is Elena Davies regarding Briar Green dual track.
Trustees and members of the OCDSB, my name is Elena Davies. I speak to you this evening on the topic of non-viability of dual-track programming under the EPR. There are several schools that raise dual-track viability concerns, some of which include Pinecrest, Sawmill Creek, York, and Briar Green. Briar Green is currently a single-track English school for which the EPR would see it reconstituted as a dual-track EE-EFI school. Briar Green is currently fed English students from 7 neighborhoods: Briar Green, Centrepoint, Qualicum Graham Park, Leslie Park, Arlington Woods, Trent Village, and Cedar Hill. The revised EPR would see five of these 7 neighborhoods removed from the boundary. Thus, the only form of students being rezoned out of Briar Green are exclusively English track students. And the only form of students being rezoned into Briar Green are French immersion students. It is my submission that removing 5 of the 7 English student pools with no English student replacement population will render English non-viable at Briar Green, and as a collateral consequence, render French immersion non-viable at Manordale and English non-viable at Knoxdale. The most up-to-date enrollment for Briar Green is a population of 263. The board has not provided specific numbers of the students leaving Briar Green under the EPR. However, when examining neighborhood demographics and the 2017 Western Review, a conservative estimate of 150 students is a realistic number to consider. 263 less 150 is a mere 113, or an average of only 14 students in English per grade, assuming equal distribution and no subsequent transfers into EFI. The OCDSB has already examined the very issue of dual-track viability at Briar Green as part of the 2017 Western Review. The board's own data generated under PAR guidelines concluded that dual track was not viable at Briar Green, and in fact consolidated populations from several neighborhoods, including the closure of Leslie Park, to create a viable and appropriate English population at Briar Green. What data does the board now have to completely overturn the research and conclusions generated under the 2017 Western Review? I submit that the board should not proceed with changes to Briar Green absent actual data that positively demonstrates dual track viability. In response to my concerns, I propose the following options in order of precedence. 1, vote no to the EPR in its entirety. 2, revise the Knoxdale cluster of schools and keep the original pre-EPR boundaries such that Briar Green remains an English-only hub. 3, conduct a PAR assessment with school information profiles to properly and meaningfully assess program viability. Or 4, phase in dual track to Briar Green to ensure that there is indeed program viability. Subject to any questions from the board, those are my submissions.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions for Ms. Davies? And I'm not seeing any. I think you've been very clear. Thank you very much. Our next delegation is Jennifer Dimoff regarding the consultation process. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Board leadership, staff, trustees. My name is Dr. Jennifer Dimoff, and I'm an organizational psychologist with a PhD in industrial organizational psychology. My expertise is in leadership, program design, and change management. My work has informed government, nonprofit, and Fortune 500s, and my research has been cited by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, the American and Canadian Psychological Associations, and the World Health Organization. Tonight, I stand before you as a mother, but also as a scientist. My concerns are not with the intent or the goals of the EPR, but with the evidence. Because programs built on flawed data don't just fail, they can also cause harm. And the data behind this EPR are flawed. All surveys have relied on open-ended, sometimes confusingly worded questions that have lacked demographic transparency, in fact, any demographic information at all. If we don't know who or even how many unique respondents there were, how can we use this data to make representative, unbiased, or meaningful decisions about the entire district? We can't. But trustees, you are being told you should. That's a red flag. All consultation data have been evaluated using thematic analysis, a method designed to summarize data and provide a foundation for future interpretation. That data have been summarized into more than 400 semantic themes that describe but don't interpret data. That's not a red flag on its own. But policy informing research almost always requires interpretation, because interpretation is what makes data meaningful, usable, and actionable. It makes it make sense. We don't know how the 10,000 plus sources of new data and the 100 descriptives, more than 100 descriptive themes they generated have been used to inform the revised review. That is a red flag, because how you use data is just as important as how you collect it and analyze it. The last piece of external data collected by the board is specific to 2 literature reviews. Literature reviews are not the equivalent of needs assessments. They don't reflect local needs, context, or implementation feasibility. They're being portrayed as if they do. Another red flag. I understand that this EPR responds to real financial and operational pressures, and that this situation is really complex. But complexity is best tackled with data, with evidence. So I'm asking you to demand it now, to maintain the vision, but pause the plan. Because what will you say when the public asks how you made this decision? Did you follow the data? Did you follow the evidence? The children of Ottawa deserve that. They deserve data that are defensible, analysis we can trust, and process the public believes in. They deserve your leadership, trustees. So please lead with courage, not compliance. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I have Trustee Kathleen Nazer.
Thank you for your delegation. So I'm an anthropologist, PhD, and psychosocial studies of anything, for sure. I understand what you're saying when we looking for data. I guess I have two questions for clarification, because you're referring to our lack of transparency and clarity around the feedback through the consultation process, which is a great question. But what I'm wondering is, like, are you questioning the premise of the clear disparities, or are you questioning the data around the importance of bilingual education? Or I'm not sure which part of it. Are you questioning the very reason for the no? Okay, so that's what I just wanted, some clarity. If you could say what it is that you have a problem with here.
Absolutely. So I think all of us in this room can agree that equitable access to bilingual education is top priority and one of the greatest things that will reduce systematic inequities in our city and even more broadly in our province. I also believe in community-based education and read the literature review about that in detail, and the literature reviews are presenting the evidence. My biggest concern is that the way that the data has been collected by the board through the surveys and consultation methods, that there's an potential, very strong potential, but we don't know because we don't have the data, for systematic bias. So a selection bias against the most equity-deserving groups in the city, because the questions were strangely worded, ambiguous, unclear, and it made it hard for me to respond to those questions. And can imagine that that's hard for people who don't just respond to surveys and create surveys all day like I do.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for Ms. Dimoff? Dr. Dimoff?
Thank you.
And I'm seeing none. Thank you very much for that presentation. Moving on then, our next presenter is Rosalind Paca. You'll have to tell me what it is when you get to the mic.
It's Rosalind Paca.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. In the OCDSB strategic plan, the very first value listed is, and I quote, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, creating an inclusive culture where every person is valued, diversity is respected, and barriers are identified and addressed so that all students can achieve equitable outcomes regardless of their circumstances. And yet the current EPR proposes to eliminate the alternative program and impose a one-size-fits-all model on every learner in this district. That's not equity, that's exclusion. This proposal strips away educational choice from students who need it most. Students the mainstream system has already failed. And it disproportionately impacts equity-deserving learners, students with special needs, students from low-income families, and Indigenous learners. Some have raised concerns about the cost of running the program, claiming the board can't afford to offer a different program. But to be clear, the alternative program is funded and delivered in the same way as the English stream. Others say alternative is optional. We don't have to offer it. Do you know what else is optional according to the ministry? French immersion. Yet the same EPR proposes to expand EFI into as many schools as possible, Why is one optional program being cut while another is being prioritized? Some have suggested the alternative program underperforms. The truth is that alt students outperform their peers in the English stream. And not only that, but 37% of alt students have identified learning exceptionalities. That speaks volumes about the program's value. If performance was the real concern, it would be the English stream under review for elimination. But again, only alt is being targeted. Some argue that the program suffers from low enrollment, but enrollment isn't low because the program has failed. It's low because it hasn't been promoted. And now that the review, most parents only find out about alt when their child is in crisis, when mainstream isn't working. And now that the review has finally sparked awareness and brought attention to the program, we are hearing how parents wish they knew about this program sooner. Parents want this program. Students need this program. The community supports this program. The answer is not elimination, it's revitalization. And ASAC has already brought you a low-cost roadmap to do just that. So trustees, I implore you to recognize that forcing every learner into the same mold is not equitable, and commit to working with ASAC and the broader community to revitalize this crucial, innovative program.
You're out of time.
I'm almost done. We need to remember that commitment to equity. This board has a duty to support and champion all students, not just the ones who thrive in mainstream. Thank you.
Thank you for your delegation. Are there any questions for this delegate? And I'm seeing none, so I think you've been very clear. Moving on then, our next presenter is Regali Mackey. Welcome.
Hello. Hi, my name is Regali Mackey, and I was born in Kudrak, Nunavik. I work at Tunga Inuit as an Inuit cultural education support worker. I work directly with Inuit students in the OCDSB and the Ottawa Catholic School Board. My role is to help Inuit youth stay connected to their culture and help them succeed in their academic setting. My priority is to provide a safe and comfortable space for storytelling, time on the land, and taking time to learn from our elders. In the spring of 2024, the OCDSB Identity-Based Data Survey continued to show unfortunate results for Indigenous students. Compared to all other students, they have the lowest attendance rates, are suspended at a higher rate, have the lowest mental health support awareness, and report very low levels of feeling safe and included at school. Similar results have been presented to us year after year, regardless of the support given by the Indigenous Education Team and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. The lack of meaningful Indigenous consultation and voice during the initial stages of the elementary program review led to the board not using the Indigenous tools and resources you already have. While reading the review, I was surprised to learn that part of the plan is to completely eliminate the alternative program. Eliminating this program will cause us to miss out on a real opportunity to improve education for Indigenous children in Ottawa. Looking at their 7 tenets, I can see how they're closely aligned with our Inuit Hauyamaya Tuhangit principles. One example is the tree families at Churchill Alternative, where students from different grades are brought together to work together. This aligns well with Ikayuktirinik, a value taught to Inuit to work together for a common purpose. What alternative schools are doing to teach their students about Indigenous cultures is very, very encouraging to see. I want to give you other examples on how we can incorporate learning, teaching more about First Nations, Métis, and Inuit cultures. My list includes students learning about traditional clothing items in art class, learning the history of lacrosse in a gym class, or an elder could come in to teach a traditional recipe in a cooking or health class. Activities like these could be organized with the help offered by Indigenous families and community partners. I believe that the well-being of Indigenous students has not been prioritized. And by pushing this plan forward before hearing from the Indigenous scholars or other voices in the Indigenous community, you're ignoring yet another vulnerable group of students. I'm asking you to pay more attention and to help our Indigenous students succeed. Thank you for giving me the time to speak tonight, and I would like to leave with this. I've seen how so many Métis, First Nations, and Inuit have had to fight for their rights, fight for their recognition, and to feel included. I've heard their voices. I hear my voice, and I hope you are listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And we do have questions from two trustees for you. Sure. Beginning with Trustee Kaplan-Mers, please.
Thank you, Miigwech. Thank you so much for your words. And I mostly wanted to just say that we are listening. My fear is we had an Indigenous young woman who came and spoke to us. That's what kicked off this whole process. And she said to us that we have to do something, we have to make some sort of change so that we can go back to the next generation and show that we addressed these disparities. You're saying to us that the alternative program is an important part of holding on to the values of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis community. And that absolutely, like, we absolutely have to hear you and support those values. Are you saying to us that the alternative school itself is what you feel to be the best space for that, as opposed to our kind of demanding that that should be in every space, in every school? Because there are only a few alternative schools, but we have a lot of schools otherwise. Yeah, so about that, I think that the tenants align well with our Hangit principles, like I said. But having individual tenants, bring them over to the mainstream board, doesn't bring the whole school culture with those tenants. You're not including all the students who are already together, the physical spaces they are learning in, the emotional supports they have in those schools, and the work that the teachers have done to provide a unique learning experience for the students. So, in the alternative school, you're saying?
In alternative schools, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And the next question is from Trustee Bell.
Thank you very much for your delegation and your powerful words. My question has to do with, you talked about meaningful consultation, and you mentioned the Indigenous scholar report that we've referenced. Could you tell us a little bit what meaningful consultation with Indigenous peoples of Ottawa and beyond would look like?
Yes, yeah. Going back to the previous delegate, the idea of having the survey questions being vague, being really confusing for people who have English as their second language, as families who might not want to interact with the school institutions due to prior residential school history. That I believe that there was really a lack of effort in trying to get to those families and those parents. And I think meaningful consultation could look like contacting those parents and asking them, what do their children need? We're 7,000 Inuit in Ottawa. We're 50,000 Indigenous people in Ottawa. There's not a lot of us.
Thank you very much for
Thank
that.
you.
And we have one more question
Oh.
for you from Trustee Dixon.
Sure. Thank you for coming in and speaking your truth for the Indigenous community. Going forward, how would you like us to be able to help the Indigenous community more within the education program?
I think
Outside of the like as a whole.
as a whole, I think,
Yeah, in a broader sense, sorry.
yeah. I think it starts with the staff and going down the line. I think that by educating the staff on the history of Indigenous people, the treatment of Indigenous people in the past and in the current day, and realize that Indigenous children don't have an easy time going to school. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Moving on, our next presenter is Karen Fletcher. Welcome.
I have a son in grade 6. Last year, my son was at a regular school, and on a typical week, I would get at least one, but usually more, calls about his behavior. He was constantly in trouble for being disruptive, interrupting teachers, and not getting along with other students. He was miserable and angry, and my husband and I were so scared for him. We moved our son into an alternative school this year. We didn't know about it before, and we hoped the program would help him. I have gotten 0 calls about his behavior this entire school year. Recently, a staff member described my son by saying, and I have permission to share this, in his short time here, he's shown himself to be a leader in the school, initiating 2 student-led extracurricular clubs, Science Club and Coding Club. This has involved recruiting and liaising with the teacher supervisors, scheduling the clubs, and securing a space. It's been a pleasure to get to know him, and we have no doubt he'll become a valued contributor to his next classroom and school community. You'd never know it was the same kid. This was accomplished with no additional staffing resources, no additional physical or digital resources, and the same class size he was in before. And cost is basically just the transportation to get him there. I will always believe that the alternative program saved my son. It turned him from a child that teachers saw as a problem to a happy contributing member of his school. And it's given me my son back. But I'd like to take a moment and ask you to consider how it's impacted the 25 or so students that don't have my son in their class, who are still in the regular school. Do you think that not having that disruptive, angry boy beside them has impacted their learning for the better? Do you think they benefit from the existence of the alternative program? My son went from being the kid where the principal had to come and give his teacher a little break to take mental health walks to the student who volunteers in the high support needs autistic class to help out. The alternative program has dramatically reduced the amount of staff time dedicated to my kid, which means other kids get that attention. Giving kids who don't fit in the regular program a place to thrive doesn't just help them. It helps the kids that do fit in the regular program, like my daughter, who is happy in a community school, and I wouldn't send to an alternative school because it wouldn't be a good fit for her. It's a cost-effective way to get kids in regular classrooms who need more teacher time, because my son wasn't behind academically, but he was definitely disrupting other learning. So as you make this decision, I want you to consider, please, all of the kids benefit from alternative schools, not just the ones that go there.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there any questions for Ms. Fletcher? And I'm not seeing any. Thank you for telling this story. Moving on then, our next delegation is Pamela Meadows. Is Ms. Meadows here?
Yes, I'm here.
This one's a virtual delegation. I forgot about that. Sorry about that. Welcome to our meeting. Can you hear us okay? And we can't hear you if you could speak up.
I can speak. Can you hear me?
That's still pretty faint.
Is that any better? That's better?
Okay, I think we're good.
Okay, perfect. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Elena Meadows. I'm a single mother with multiple disabilities, and I'm sorry, I smile when I'm nervous. I rent a tiny studio attic apartment. I do not own a home or car. I rely on public transit. Attending this meeting in person isn't possible. I don't have a partner to help care for my son. I'm a survivor of domestic abuse, and I'm currently on the Ontario Disability Support Program, which allocates less than $2,000 a month for my family. We are located in Centertown, which places us in the catchment for Elgin Street Public School. My son has been in French immersion since grade 1. Over the past 3 years, we've been welcomed into a supportive school community. His best friend is in his class, and their parents and I serve as each other's emergency contacts. This network is crucial for families like mine. Without it, being a single parent, being low income, and living with disabilities would be incredibly isolating. Please know that the proposed EPR changes to the school boundaries will scatter mine and my son's community. While my son may remain at Elgin, many of his close friends will not. The disruption will be deeply destabilizing for a child who has already faced so much. My son has had to be resilient through time in a domestic violence shelter, through pandemic isolation, and through shared custody transitions, living in a cramped space and with minimal resources. Every disruption takes a toll, and now you're asking him to lose the consistency and relationships he's finally built at school, in his classroom, and in his friendships. I've heard that the EPR aims to advance equity, particularly for families like mine, but what is being proposed does not feel like equity. True equity requires understanding the lived experience of people and not assumptions. I urge the board to slow down and conduct a proper community impact assessment before finalizing decisions. For my family and many others, a phased-in approach, allowing current students to remain while new boundaries apply to incoming students, is the most equitable and least disruptive path forward. Please remember that we are not just numbers and addresses to move around on a map. Our children's relationships, support networks, and mental health matter. Please don't dismiss these in the name of efficiency. The board's process has lacked transparency and meaningful community consultation. I want you to know that I do not see my voice represented in the EPR proposals. The parent feedback survey did not collect demographic data. Without it, how can the impact on marginalized families be assessed? I have many questions for the board, which I will send in a follow-up email. For tonight, I will end with my son's question, where he says it doesn't make sense. They are bouncing kids here and there for 2 years and then there for another 2 years. Why don't they change things gradually? I welcome any questions you might have. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for your presentation. And we have one question for you from Trustee Bell.
Okay.
Trustee Bell? Trustee Bell, are you on mute?
They're not moving on my screen.
Yeah, the image is frozen. Trustee Jenkins?
While we wait for Trustee Bell to unfreeze, just to clarity, your son is in what grade, sorry?
So he's currently in grade 3. When the EPR comes in, he will be in grade 5. So for his group of kids, they will be moved. He'll stay in his school. Other kids will be moved for 2 years to a different school and then moved in after 2 years to junior high, and then they moved again after 2 years in junior high. for high school. So for him, for grade 5 and 6, he's losing basically 50% of his friends or more.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And Trustee Bell, you were frozen there for a few minutes, so please go ahead. Trustee Bell, you had your hand up. Are you going to ask a question? Not frozen, but so I'll go on to Trustee Kaplan-Murth.
Thank you. Thank you for your delegation. And thank you for your courage in speaking up and saying that lived experiences for families that are more marginalized haven't been heard. What I'm wondering is how might we have better reached? So you said, for example, you wouldn't have been able to get here tonight.
Right.
How might we have been able to better get out the information from more marginalized families?
I think there's a lot of different things that have been going wrong in this process. I have a friend who's ESL that also has a son at my school. And for her, as an example, the school locator doesn't work for her because she uses the phone in a different language. The school locator doesn't function. On top of that, the survey was really hard to write through for me because it was all long answer. And on top of that, it didn't collect any demographic data. So you don't know who's having who the things are having an impact on. When you are saying, well, is this program affecting you in a positive or a negative way? You have no information about whether or not it's a marginalized person that's saying that it's impacting them negatively. Additionally, the only online consultations were all grouped questions and no one was actually directly had a question answered. So when I was asking a question, when my friend who's ESL was sitting with me participating, all of our questions were not directly answered, and the board sheltered the questions where you only saw questions that were proposed that the board chose to actually display. Otherwise, all questions were hidden.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll try again. Trustee Bell.
Thank you very much, and thanks for your patience. I froze there for a minute. Ella, thank you very much for your delegation and for writing to me over the past couple of weeks. I'm wondering what these considerations that you've brought forth for potential grandparenting, I think are very compelling. What would be the considerations that you would like for us to, as a board, to bring forth for grandparenting?
I think it would be especially important to look at kids who've been affected by things like COVID isolation. Like this is a group of cohort of kids, especially the grade 4, 5, 6s that have already been hit with a lot of disruptions because of online schooling, or my son didn't even go to kindergarten because of COVID. So they took a lot longer for the networks to start developing for them. And then on top of that, they're now getting split. So to look at the different things that have already impacted these kids and take that into account. And then the other thing is to think about like, what supports do these kids need? So we've talked about support for the kids, but maybe if they're transitioning to a new school, we'll give them support. What about the kids who are left behind? So if you are shifting kids around, you need to think not just for the kids that are there, that stay and go. They both need support. And we all have a community that needs to be thought of and really taken into consideration.
And that is our 3 questions. Thank you very much again for your delegation.
Thank you for your time.
And we will move on to our next delegation, Angela Wellman. And please begin when you're ready.
Thank you very much for welcoming here today. I'll be speaking on behalf of the Alternative Program. The Alternative Program is not a frivolous or privileged offering, as some have recently suggested. It's a lifeline for many families, and it deserves your protection. I'm a product of both the Canadian and the Swedish education systems. As a youth, I was deeply impacted by aspects of the Scandinavian model: non-competitiveness, multi-age learning, child and teacher-led education teams, and an emphasis on outdoor exploration and learning. I now have 2 children a year apart in age, one neurotypical and one neurodivergent. When, during the height of the pandemic, it came time for kindergarten registration, I searched across Ottawa for a school that reflected those Scandinavian values. But more critically, I needed a school that would welcome, educate, and find worth in both of my children. A single school where they could thrive side by side, learning to value each other's differences. After months of searching, I found the alternative program, but not on the board website, through word of mouth. Alternative programming costs no more than the core English or French immersion streams. No financial justification has been presented for its elimination. We have heard the concerns raised about the program's EQAO results, but be honest about what those results show. Scores from small student populations that host a high volume of atypical learners with profiles that do not align with standardized testing. And yet the alternative program still outperforms the core English stream. To judge the alternative program based on EQAO results alone is misleading and unfair. Alternative schools foster success that can't be measured by test scores: confidence, creativity, empathy, critical thinking, and resilience. The non-competitive model of the alternative program opens doors for students who are regularly pushed out of the core English and French immersion programs. Trustees, the message consistently being sent to your constituency by these core programs is that you do not want us to be part of your educational community. And as a parent, I cannot believe that that is what you want me to hear. The alternative program is OCDSB's most adaptive offering. It's designed to support a diverse range of learners in a way the core programs cannot. With rates of neurodivergence being nearly 15% of your communities, now is not the time to eliminate the only program tailored to meet the needs of those students and their families. This is not a program for the privileged. It is a place of belonging for those who are made to feel like unwelcome outsiders in the system that's been designed. Don't dismantle what's already working, not for budget optics or for misunderstood metrics. Stand up for the children and families who need this the most. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. And we do have a question from Trustee Kaplan-Murth.
Thank you. So I hear you, and you're saying students are being pushed out of mainstream programs, and that we want to support neurodiverse students and welcome outsiders, creativity, competence, critical thinking, etc. Isn't it possible, and I'm speaking as a parent whose child was pushed out, my eldest, I get it, but isn't it possible that in fact it's the pushing out of mainstream that is the problem, that we should be demanding that our students, our children are supported in terms of their creativity and their competence and their critical thinking, and that they shouldn't be considered outsiders in the mainstream?
I don't think any of our students should be considered outsiders, no. But I do think there's aspects to the non-competitiveness of the alternative model that cannot be replicated across the other core program offerings. There is a certain level of behavioral compliance expected in core programming that many of our neurodivergent community members cannot attain. And to place that burden upon them when it's impossible to attain it, yet their educational attainment can supersede it, is unfair.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm not seeing any other questions. If I may, from the chair, ask one question, and that is, when you speak of neurodivergent, what exactly do you mean by that?
Neurodivergence can represent a broad range of different ways of being. That could be autistic, it could be somebody who is ADHD, somebody who has, processing disorders or language disorders. There's a wide variety that fits under the current umbrella.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And I'm still not seeing any other questions, so thank you for your delegation.
Thank you.
And we have been listening now for a bit over an hour. So I would like to call a 5-minute recess, just to give people a chance to stand up and stretch and walk around a little bit. And the game has started, but there's no score on either side. If you could please take your seats. I would like to call our special board meeting back to order with the news that we didn't have any hockey information for you before our recess. However, the score is currently 1-0 in Toronto's favor. I thought you'd feel that way about it. So with that, we will resume our delegations. Moving on to 5.1L on our agenda. And I'd like to welcome Shannon Warick. And please begin when you're ready.
Good evening. When the EPR proposal was first released, many parents, myself included, reacted personally to how it would affect our children and communities. But as we became better informed, our concerns evolved into something more fundamental, the alarming lack of due diligence in this process. Some trustees have asserted that the OCDSB is following the PAR process. This is true only insofar as the board is avoiding the real accountabilities of the PAR guidelines by restricting enrollment changes to under 50%. The OCDSB does not appear to be following its own policy for exempting schools from the PAR process, a policy which hasn't been updated in nearly a decade. You are being asked to vote on major accommodations changes without essential safeguards and information that responsible governance demands. There's no accommodations review committee with school and community representation, no school information profiles with critical data on enrollment trends, facilities, and programs, no staff report providing at least 3 options with implementation costs and impact assessments on programming, well-being, board resources, and the local community. There is no analysis of potential enrollment shifts and their budget implications. There are no clear metrics to measure success or failure. This isn't just a procedural concern. In 2019, the Ontario Ombudsman investigated the Near North District School Board for concerns regarding their PAR process, concluding that the board's failure to follow a rigorous and transparent process damaged its relationship with stakeholders. The report was aptly titled, "Lessons Not Learned." We all want equity, efficient use of resources, and the best for our children. But the means matter as much as the ends. Making major decisions without proper due diligence risks creating new problems while failing to solve existing ones. Even on the stated goal of creating dual-track schools, the proposal falls short. There remain 4 English-only schools, mostly in disadvantaged areas. The viability of new programs in other schools is questionable, and the revised plan acknowledges more accommodations changes may be needed. Instead of gathering relevant data and testing approaches before expanding them, the board is conducting a massive experiment with our communities and our children's education. Over recent weeks, parents have demonstrated significant engagement, sharing information, resources, and talents. Rather than leveraging this community energy, the board has positioned parents as obstacles instead of partners in their children's education. Meaningful consultation came too late, with the original timeline suggesting decisions were predetermined. I respect that you feel pressure to act on long-standing issues, but your responsibility as trustees isn't just to do something, it's to do the right thing, supported by evidence and proper governance processes. The board member code of conduct requires you to discharge your duties in a manner that will inspire public confidence in the abilities and integrity of the board. I ask you to honor that commitment by deferring this decision until a proper accommodations review process is completed. Our children, our schools, and your legacy as trustees deserve nothing less.
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions from trustees? And I'm not seeing any. You've been very clear. Thank you. Moving on, our next delegation is from Anthony Wong.
If you can follow along the slides that were presented in the agenda, or if you can read it later on. Critical considerations for inclusive education. I support inclusive education, but only when it's truly ready or properly funded. I don't believe OCDSB is ready to phase out specialized program classes. Other provinces are struggling. Just this January, British Columbia, often seen as the model for inclusive education, faced a province-wide complaint about students with disabilities being excluded. That's a clear warning. Let me explain why our board isn't ready in planning, funding, supports, and measurable outcomes. One, first, there's no clear resource implementation framework. Given the scale of this change, I recommend that staff provide a trustee-reviewed implementation plan that addresses staffing capacity, secured funding, risk assessment, and also accountability structures. Trustees don't manage operations, but they are responsible for oversight. This isn't micromanaging, it's due diligence and the basics. Second, there's no new funding for an already underfunded system. Special education is already stretched thin. Trustees must require clear proof of new dedicated funding, not emergency stopgaps or reallocated dollars, but real sustained investment. Without it, approving major changes would repeat resourcing failures already seen across Ontario and beyond. Third, parents and unions agree in-class support is inadequate with no clear fix ahead. Before any vote, trustees need concrete plans, not assumptions, to address ongoing shortages of educational assistants, special education teachers, and other key support staff. Vulnerable students shouldn't be placed in under-resourced classrooms. Without a clear staffing plan, proceeding would be irresponsible. Fourth, teaching specialized program classes requires specialized skills. The board must assess whether general teachers, EAs, daycare staff, and support staff are truly ready, not just informed, to lead inclusive classrooms. Currently, there's inadequate literacy support in French for special needs students. Many locations also lack purpose-built facilities, equipment, and learning materials, bilingue en plus. Without formal readiness data, trustees cannot responsibly approve this shift. Fifth, student transitions are critical and must be backed by data. Moving students with complex needs is a major adjustment, not just a classroom shift. Trustees must have a clear, de-identified evidence that individualized transition plans and supports are in place. Without it, vulnerable students will face major risks and trustees will have failed in their duty of care. Six, inclusion must be measurable now, not later. Trustees shouldn't have to guess what success looks like. Key operational metrics must be clearly defined upfront. Participation, progress, support levels, and measurable student outcomes. Without them, we're not tracking inclusive education, we're just hoping for it. I support inclusive education, but only when it's truly ready and properly funded. I don't believe OCDSB is ready to phase out specialized program classes. Oops, sorry. I believe in inclusive education truly, but it must be built on real plans, real data, and real funding, not vague estimates. We also need sustainable risk-based cost funding model that reflects the complexity of student special needs, not just enrollment. Inclusion isn't a slogan, it's a responsibility. The ministry must fund it explicitly. The board must present a clear evidence-based implementation plan, and trustees must take the time to assess the real gaps in planning, supports, funding, and outcome metrics before moving forward.
Thank you for your presentation. And I have a question from Trustee Lyra.
Thanks. In your written submission, you talk about a lack of a clear definition and operational metrics for true inclusion. What do you mean when you say true inclusion? What does that look like from your perspective?
So for true inclusion, it would mean like,
I have put you on the spot. If you want to give me a written answer at a later time, that would also be acceptable.
yes, I would like to do that.
Okay.
And we also have a question from Trustee Kaplan-Murth.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Anthony, for your delegation. I'm wondering if you could give us a sense of whether you feel that the special needs students, communities, organizations have been heard in this process. I think we've heard tonight that Indigenous communities may not have been heard, and families in living in low socioeconomic households may not have been heard. What is your sense of whether or not people representing special needs have been heard in this EPR process?
That they have not been heard. They, well, I was just speaking to the parent earlier. The question of using properly, like proper survey methods. For example, the using properly trained. Having a properly trained statistician in social methods, staff on board. It just simply as one person that oversees the whole across the board, properly trained to look at it, and that's critical, literally critical, to oversee the whole staff, where to look at, how to design survey methods, where to survey, and getting, for example, the other person that on Indigenous questions, making sure that they're properly surveyed and in the right methods, not just quantitative, but qualitative, and using all the different methods and approaching the questions the right ways, using Likert question, using the right methods, and in terms of when using AI, using the latest approaches that's vetted. So all these things, best practices across the board, that's recognized and cost effective too. So and when I say a statistician, social methods, it's because why is in education faculties across Canada, we have a shortage of people trained in quantitative methods. I've studied in education and graduate studies, and to my knowledge, we don't have a lot of education faculties trained in mixed methods with a high degree in quantitative methods.
And
so there's a shortage.
Stop you there because you are well over time on your response, which I think has pretty much answered the question. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions for Mr. Wong? And I'm not seeing any. We have read your submission with interest.
Thank you.
Thank you again. And we will move on to Noah Arshino. When you're ready.
Good evening. I'm here tonight as a parent of 3 children who attend Connaught Public School. Every morning, I walk my kids 5 minutes to their dual-track school where they're enrolled currently in French immersion. The revised EPR, however, which carves out the most walkable part of the Connaught catchment and sends our kids to Devonshire, will make it harder for families in our catchment to access French immersion, directly counter to the underlying purpose of this entire process. The carve-out at Connaught is disproportionately impacting our students on a citywide basis. Consider this. There are 6 schools that will be single-track French immersion under the new model. 3 of these will see their boundaries expand to add new students. Devonshire is the only single-track school where new students will have a longer commute than they currently do to access French immersion. Those students who are coming from the most walkable part of the Connaught catchment again will have to travel further, often triple the distance than they currently do to access French immersion. This change will reduce the percentage of students walking to school from approximately 96% currently to just 50%, contradicting the goal of fostering community schools and putting more kids in cars rather than walking. Now, the board initially claimed that 51 students at Connaught would be affected by the boundary changes. We then heard that that number was revised to 44. However, parent surveys show that only approximately 30 French immersion students would need to move from Connaught to Devonshire. Why disrupt so few students, especially when keeping them at Connaught wouldn't even fill Connaught to capacity? Which brings me to grandparenting. Grandparenting should be by default, not a case-by-case exemption. Connaught parents and Devonshire parents, in the absence of reverting to the current boundaries, are asking for a simple, clear commitment that all current Connaught students, along with their siblings, be allowed to remain at Connaught if they choose. This would reduce the likelihood of splitting siblings in French immersion and the track. It would keep communities together reduce negative mental health outcomes, and prioritize education. And it would not compromise the viability of any of the schools in the region, including Cambridge, which is the real reason for this numbers game in the first place. Grandparenting should not be a case-by-case exemption process left to the discretion of individual principals or superintendents. Instead, it must be a clear, equitable policy that ensures all current students and their siblings can remain at their school if they choose. Trustees and families need that information now, not after the vote. It's not an afterthought for later. Grandparenting should be the default policy for all affected families. The EPR was designed to promote equitable access to French immersion and community-based education, yet the revised plan reduces access to French immersion for Connaught families. It forces siblings to attend different schools and creates logistical and financial burdens for families who rely on childcare. 3 very quick solutions. 1, revert the boundaries for Connaught Public School. All the problems faced with the numbers, access to French immersion, grandparenting, childcare, etc., would be avoided if you kept the most walkable part of the catchment within the boundary. Solution 2, implement a grandparenting policy that allows all current families to remain at the school. Solution 3, delay the vote on the EPR until a comprehensive plan is developed with clear guidelines on childcare exemptions and support for families. Those solutions prioritize education and will enable you to uphold the principles of equity, community, and access that the EPR was designed to achieve. And for the sake of our kids, please do what's best for their education. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your delegations. Are there any questions for Mr. Arshino? Trustee Lyra?
Thanks. You said in cars, kids in cars, not kids on buses. Is the catchment area that you're talking about within the standard walking distance of Devonshire?
Yeah, it would take kids from about between 400 and 700 meters from their current school to approximately 1.6 kilometers to their next school, which is just under.
So still walking distance.
Still walking distance, triple the distance though.
Are there any other questions? And I'm seeing none, so thank you very much for your delegation. It was very clear. Moving on, our next delegation is from David Krochmelnich. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. My apologies.
That's pretty good. Good evening. 2 of the most important tenets in the EPR, community-based education and educational equity, are not being met in our Severn Avenue Public School community. Educational equity has been a long-standing issue at Severn. Even before this review, when you designate a school as French immersion only, you unintentionally exclude children from their own neighborhood school. You also force families into tough decisions if their child struggles with language acquisition. That was our reality and the reality of many others we know. Our eldest child was having difficulty in both languages and needed to focus on English. Leaving the FI program meant leaving his friends, community school, and his younger sister behind. At Severn, many families stay in French immersion, even when it's not a good fit. Our community ran a survey of over 50 parents representing just over 100 students. Almost everyone thinks the shift away from the K-3 model is an improvement. It helps keep some young families together. However, keeping Severn as an FI-only school goes against the very objectives of this review, and a resounding majority of our survey who prefer a K-6 dual-track program. Severn, one of the only growing schools in the area, needs to be a dual-stream K-6. Students in the English stream should not have to continue commuting across a major highway. It's unsafe and unnecessary when a community school could be an option. The community greatly supports this idea, even if it means the addition of portables, of which Severn only has 1. This review was a chance to fix systemic problems, not maintain the status quo. When all of the elementary schools in our neighborhood community are under capacity, it doesn't make sense to send students who live north of the highway south of it for school, especially when schools like SRB, a 7-8 school south of the highway, is at 150% capacity. Perhaps some of those students should go to Pinecrest for 7 and 8. There's a better way. Here's a proposal which I outlined in a map in the agenda, and I have extras I can hand out. These are practical, safety-focused, equity-based, and community-centric changes that directly reflect community feedback and student needs. Regina would stay a K-6 in both English and French immersion. Those students go to Woodruff for 7 and 8, where Woodruff remains K-8 with both tracks. This change supports a significantly safer and more direct commute for the students at Regina. Severn becomes a K-6 dual-track school. Those students go to D. Roy Kennedy for 7 and 8. D. Roy stays a K-8 dual-track. Again, this ensures a safer, more logical school pathway that keeps kids within their community and off high-traffic roads and the highway. And to relieve pressure, shift some of Sir Robert Borden's 7-8 students to Pinecrest Elementary. In fact, this is one of many proposals to avoid crossing a 400 series highway. Imagine you're a parent of a child who wants to stay at their friend's house after school, but to get home, they need to walk through 2 industrial neighborhoods and cross a 400 series highway. That is not a community and doesn't sound safe. Thank you.
And thank you very much for your delegation. Are there any questions for this delegate? And I'm not seeing any. I think you were quite clear. Next on our list, Elizabeth Whitten regarding Sawmill Creek and Blossom Park. Welcome.
Good evening, board members, directors, and attendees. My name is Elizabeth Whitten. I am a mom of 3 young children and I work full-time. I am here because I want to ensure the voices of concerned parents within Zone 11 are heard. The EPR destroys our sense of community on multiple levels. My main concerns are regarding dual-track viability, increased transitions, sibling separation, and childcare. My eldest daughter is in senior kindergarten at Sawmill Creek. My son is registered to start this fall, and my youngest will start in 2026. I live 1 kilometer away from both Sawmill Creek and Blossom Park. We chose Sawmill Creek because of early French immersion, and our children attend the same school as their cousins. My daughter is extremely shy, and it takes her at least 4 months to adjust to new educators each year within a familiar school. She will be uprooted and moved to a new school without her cohort because the majority of her friends have older siblings, and then will return to Sawmill Creek 5 years later for grades 7 and 8. The revised EPR has put the program viability at risk in multiple schools: Sawmill Creek, Blossom Park, Briar Green, Pinecrest, and York, to name a few. And this is a major concern for parents and should be for the board. Blossom Park grades 3 to 6 enhanced English students are proposed to be grandparented to ensure sustainability of the program. Sawmill Creek will have 123 French immersion students, which is approximately 15 students per grade. Blossom Park will have approximately 82 students in French immersion and 84 students in enhanced English. That's approximately 13 students per grade without considering exemptions. My children and many others will be in split grades throughout their entire elementary school education. How is this setting up our children for success? Also, there may not be a need for another French immersion school, as our neighborhood and many others currently are served by 2 French schools, 2 French immersions, and 1 English only, all within 1 kilometer across 4 school boards. Under your proposed plan for exemptions, will current Sawmill Creek students be considered for grandparenting, or due to the viability of the program at the receiving school, will these exemptions be denied? Why are we altering programs at Sawmill Creek and Blossom Park when the proposed plan isn't viable and offers a lesser quality of programming and education? Why has the board not been proactive to communicate with families regarding childcare? Blossom Park currently does not offer EDP, something many families at Sawmill Creek rely on. The combined timeline of canvassing parents, licensing, and hiring will require more than 1 year. Childcare needs cannot be an afterthought, especially when you are moving students from a school with childcare to a school currently without it. The EPR is not only going to impact students, it is going to impact parents' ability to work. There are still many families who are unaware of the EPR and challenges they will face, and many families within these 2 schools, English is not their first language. How is the revised EPR, using your term equity, actually equitable to all? I do not comprehend how the board can vote for an EPR that has so many unanswered questions, lack of analysis, and data to support its goals and implementation. There is a better way to initiate change at this magnitude, but it does take time to engage all stakeholders and implement properly. In conclusion, I am asking the board to vote no to the revised EPR. If this is not an option, I am asking for you to make amendments to the changes you are proposing to Sawmill Creek and Blossom Park and leave them as status quo. Sawmill Creek remain a French immersion and English, and Blossom Park remain in English only. If that's not an option, grandparent current French immersion students at Sawmill Creek, along with their siblings. Thank you.
And thank you for your presentation. Do we have any questions for Ms. Whitten? And I'm not seeing any. I think you were pretty solid on your numbers and the presentation for
Thank you.
anyone who knows the area. Thank you. Our next delegation is Kayla Morrow regarding Devonshire.
Hi, there are actually two of us registered to speak to this topic.
Two people is just fine, but you still only get 3 minutes, I'm afraid.
Yes, understood. Thank you. So, good evening and thanks for having us. My name is Kayla Morrow and I live on Pamela Street near Pub Italia with my husband and 3 kids ages 2, 5, and 7.
And I'm Genevieve Casey. I live on nearby Norman Street, also close to Pub Italia, with my husband and 3 kids aged 2, 6, and 8. We're here tonight to appeal to trustees, directors, and the OCDSB Planning Department to make our case that the Devonshire Community Public School should remain our designated community school. We provided a PowerPoint to accompany our delegation. We'd ask that you please follow along as we'll be referring to maps of the area.
So we'll start with a bit about our neighborhood. We live in the Dow's Lake area, west of Rochester, south of the 417 and north of Carling. If you've been to the Tulip Festival, you've probably parked on our streets. Our neighborhood is a unique and distinct community spanning the O-Train and Trillium multi-use pathway with 4 pedestrian crossings over the O-Train tracks that blend our community with the Civic Hospital area. Our closest playground and the meeting point for families on either side of the O-Train is just west of the tracks at Eve Tremblay Park.
Our children currently attend Devonshire Public School, easily accessed by our community via the adjacent multi-use pathway. Under the first proposal, our kids would have been sent to Muchmore in the Glebe, and under the new plan, they are redistricted to Cambridge near Bronson. This is unwalkable, with the route including busy and dangerous Rochester and Gladstone. It's also very much misaligned with our community's boundaries as defined by ourselves and residents, Ottawa city planners, the Ottawa Real Estate Board, and other school boards.
So the first map we'd like to show is the Ottawa Catholic School Board's elementary boundary for our area. Our kids would attend St. George Catholic Elementary to the west of us. You'll note that our neighborhood is the only area east of the tracks included in this boundary. And the solid line alongside our neighborhood is the Trillium Pathway, which is a near direct channel to the nearby and accessible Devonshire Public School, marked with a star on our map. As we make our way to and from school on the path, we run into our friends who live on either sides of the tracks.
The second map forms part of the Ottawa Secondary Plan published a few years ago with our neighborhood, the Dow's Lake District, just north of Dow's Lake. Again, you'll see that our neighborhood spans both sides of the train tracks. The city's official plan emphasizes the importance of the multi-use pathway for community success, and it really makes pedestrian first a reality.
And lastly, you'll see a map of our community as defined by OREB, which shows our neighborhood spanning the tracks bounded by Eve Tremblay Park. This park is a regular meeting point for our families where we chatted with neighborhood parents while pushing our kids on the swings about where they might eventually go to school.
We therefore propose that the Devonshire boundary be revised to include children from our neighborhood, keeping them at their community school where they may safely walk or ride their bikes to. If it's helpful from a planning perspective, the boundary could also be revised to the Fisher Park Public School for grades 7 and 8 to keep cohorts together.
And more generally, as you've likely heard from other parents in the Devonshire parent community, we'd like to advocate for flexible grandparenting for all affected Devonshire families, especially given that the school has the space to accommodate. There are very legitimate concerns felt by our school community about losing existing childcare arrangements and the lack of current capacity to provide before and after school care at Cambridge. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
And thank you for your presentation, especially the many maps. And we do have a question for you from Trustee Bell.
Hi, thank you for your delegation. My question for clarification is what zone for the school board do you actually fall within? And then what school falls within that zone?
I could take that. So technically, I don't know the number of the zone, but I do know that you are our trustee. We would fall in your area. However, when we were initially proposed to attend Muchmore, that would have been Trustee Kaplan-Mirth's area, and Devonshire is in Trustee Nash's area. So I'm not entirely sure how much that factors into planning, but yes, you are a trustee.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, and thanks for your messages.
And are there any other questions for these delegates? And I'm not seeing any, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we will move on then to Andrew Koch. Regarding elementary alternative.
Great, thank you. Good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I know it's a long weekend, a long meeting, so I appreciate your attention. Yes, I am here tonight to add my voice to the many parents expressing their support for the continuation of the alternative program. I'm the parent of two bright and energetic boys who've been attending Churchill Alternative School since kindergarten. So I'm, I guess, have about 6 years of experience with the school. I'd like to begin by sharing a question from my 9-year-old son. Over the last few months, he's heard his mom and I talk a lot about this process and our concerns and frustrations. And he recently asked me, "Dad, why do they want to close a school that everybody likes so much?" I reassured him, of course, that he will most likely, based on the current proposal, be able to continue at his school until grade 6. But I couldn't really give him a good answer as to why the board feels it's necessary to discontinue a long-standing program that's so highly regarded by parents, students, and teachers alike. I'm feeling quite disappointed that this recommendation is being made without having conducted a comprehensive and objective evaluation or needs assessment that actually focuses on the alternative schools and that meaningfully engages those with direct knowledge and experience with the program. Yes, there's been opportunities for us to give inputs through forums like this, but I haven't seen any effort to really dig down and look at the strengths and assets of the program. It feels like the program's misunderstood and that the testimonies of so many parents are not being heard or valued in this process. As others have stated, I share their concern that EQAO results are being used to justify this decision without acknowledging the broader context, such as the proportion of students with special needs, as well as looking at socioeconomic factors. And I think it should go without saying that there are many aspects to a quality education and a good school that aren't reflected in standardized testing results. At Churchill, my sons are exceeding academic expectations for their grade levels. But equally, if not more important to me as a parent, is that they enjoy going to school, that they show a love of learning. They're developing positive self-esteem and resilience without having to worry about competition at such an early age. They're learning to express themselves creatively and building positive relationships through multi-age tree family activities and through an amazing and inclusive music clubs. Some of you may have heard of those. I'm confident that they're being well prepared for future successes both as learners and as engaged community members. I feel there's a missed opportunity here to recognize and build on the strengths of this program. If, as one of our trustees has claimed, alternative schools are silos of acceptance within the board, maybe we should be celebrating their success in this regard rather than starting to tear these silos down. Until students who don't fit mainstream norms no longer feel pushed out of their schools, I believe it's important to provide parents with choices that best meet their children's needs. So I'm appealing to trustees tonight to take a few moments out of your busy schedules to review the materials that the ASAC parents have painstakingly put together, assuming you haven't already. I'm sure many of you have. They seek to address many of the concerns that trustees and staff have raised, but also provide thoughtful recommendations onto how the program could be sustained and revitalized. I appreciate that this is not an easy process, and as for you as trustees, and that the board faces many challenges. But I urge you to learn more about our schools and to think carefully before voting to end a program that has been incredibly valuable and even transformative for so many families. Thank you.
Thank you for your delegation. Are there any questions for Mr. Koch? And I am seeing none.
Thanks.
Much appreciated. And yes, we have received materials from ASAC. Our next delegation is Emma McQueen regarding Osgood Public School.
Hi, thank you. My name is Emma McQueen, and I am a parent at Osgoode Public School whose family is affected by the boundary change. I am asking for our boundary to please be reviewed because the goals of the EPR are not being met. One of the stated goals is community-based education with repeated references being made to neighborhood. This proposal moves us substantially further from home, in my family's case, almost 3 times further. For rural communities, these distances are important. It's not a matter of being sent to the school the next block over. Not that that has any less consequences. Castro Valley, where we are being zoned for, is the farthest geographically of 4 public schools. It is 12 kilometers from my home. Cars on the Rideau is 3 kilometers. Manotick Public is 10 kilometers, and our home school of Osgoode Public is 4 kilometers. For context, 12 kilometers, the distance from my home to our proposed new school, is the same distance as from where we meet today is to Parliament Hill. Hardly community-based education when there are 3 other schools with the same programs offered right within our zone. Many of us will have to drive, or a school bus will, through Osgoode to get to Castro Valley. For some families being moved, the difference between the 2 schools is negligible, and for our rural families who live on the outskirts of town, their connection to school and community is strong. Moving these children is detrimental. For our family, Greeley is neither our legal town nor our community, definitely not our neighborhood, and certainly not our closest of 4 public schools. Geographically, this change does not make sense. It moves our children much further from their community and neighborhood. Since it is illogical geographically to change boundaries for Osgoode, then the goal of 2 program pathways and population redistribution could be a factor. However, both Osgoode and Castro Valley are already dual-track schools, and no grade reconfigurations are being proposed for either school. There is no need for change based on this goal. According to OCDSB enrollment data for 24-25 school year, Osgoode is at 91% capacity and no new areas are being added. However, Castro Valley, where we are being rezoned for, is at 155% capacity. Even under the proposed boundary changes, the school will remain well over capacity. Moving rooted children out of their community, away from their peers, from a school that is underpopulated with the same services to one that is drastically overpopulated makes no sense. The board has also stated that the EPR boundary changes will allow children to move with their cohorts. Only 23 children are affected at OPS. This means kids will go without cohorts, and those that do will have 1 or 2. The negative effect to these kids' mental health from being ripped from their school with no friends cannot be understated. In closing, I please ask that the proposed boundary changes for Osgoode Public School be reviewed again. It was glibly stated at one of these meetings that the changes will make our boundaries a rectangle shape, which is more appealing to look at. We ask that our rural community be looked at with more care than that. While I agree with the EPR goals of community-based education and accessibility to dual-track program pathways for everyone, in our case, the changes being proposed do not meet these goals, either based on population or programming. And in the case of community-based education, the changes outright defy the goal, moving us farther outside our community and our neighborhood. Thank you.
Trustee Jenkins has a question.
Hi there. Thank you for your delegation. So just for clarification, with the elementary program review, you're saying with the boundaries, 23 children at Osgoode Public School will be.
Yes, an exceptionally small number of children will be moved to a school that's further away.
So you would be supportive of grandfathering those 23 students to remain?
Yes, I would be supportive of that. I would also request that the boundary be looked at. It geographically does not make sense for future families to be sent far outside of their community. So I'd like to also have considered future children, not just our current children in the schools. Thank you.
And a question from Trustee Lyra. You went away too soon?
Thanks. What rationale, if any, were given for the boundary that was that you had taken issue with?
Yes, thank you for that question. We've been unable to get an answer on why that boundary change has been made outside of being told that a rectangle shape is more visibly appealing.
I see. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just now that you've sat down again, just no, it's okay, sit down. I just want to double check that we don't need to make you get up one more time. And we don't. We have come to the end of our oral delegations this evening. And I would like to thank all of you for taking the time for putting together really good, clear presentations and offering us some interesting things to think about. In terms of written delegations, we do have a number of written delegations this evening as well. And I would, just for the record, list these. Nicole Whitten regarding Sawmill Creek Elementary School. Atifa Abedini regarding the Briar Green Knoxdale boundary. Emily Burnett regarding Castor Valley and Greeley Elementary. Leah Gannell regarding Briar Green Knoxdale and grandfathering. Amanda Wolf regarding grandparenting exceptions. Deirdre Morris Tiwari regarding Churchill and Broadview. Rebecca Taggart regarding the grandparenting policy. Renee Tupam Piper regarding the revised proposal overall. Tessa Milks regarding the elementary alternative program. Carrie Komish regarding the elementary alternative program. Romy Swan regarding the elementary alternative program. Alex Carr regarding Connet Public School. Jeff Morton regarding the elementary program review. Natasha LaRussa regarding the Learning Disability Specialized Intervention Program. Megan Maloney regarding the Osgood Public School. Janine Wilson regarding Arch Street Public School. Kayla Luff regarding Charles H. Hulse Public School. Selena Evans regarding the Elementary Alternative Program. Scott Barsley regarding inclusion in the elementary program review. Joanne Pendon, Sir Winston Churchill Public School, and Megan Snyder with regard to program viability concerns. And many of the people who are listed as written delegations had requested to be written delegations as opposed to oral delegations. We did not have to refuse very many requests to present orally, either in person or by Zoom, which I was very pleased that we were able to accommodate almost everybody who asked. And at this point in time, the director has been busy taking notes throughout all of these delegations, and I would like to give him a few minutes to speak.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone. Just wanted to extend my appreciation to the delegates this evening related to a number of items. I know there have been some individual unique comments made by delegates, but also some trends that have been shared, including the exemption process, and staff will look to do our very best to provide as much detail as we possibly can at this point in time, with an upcoming report on that as an example, for instance, for consideration, along with a number of other factors that have been mentioned. So again, as our Chair Scott has mentioned, my thanks as well to the delegates this evening for taking the time to share your perspectives with us.
And with that, we have come to item 6, matters for information. Do we have any matters for information? I don't think we do this evening. That brings us to the end of our agenda. I declare this meeting adjourned. And having adjourned the meeting, I regret to inform you that the score is now Toronto 2, Ottawa 0. So those of you who are hockey fans will need to go home and watch the rest of the game for yourselves. Thank you so much for being here this evening.